Welcome to the debate. Today, we are examining the campaign setting and really the entire game design philosophy of Redelf World.
Yes, a very dense system to dive into today.
Extremely dense. But, if you think about the physical world we inhabit, gravity doesn't care about your narrative arc. If you step off a cliff, you fall. It's just an uncompromising mechanical reality.
Right.
Whereas in traditional fantasy role-playing games, we usually expect a safety net.
Exactly.
Plot armor. We expect the universe to bend to the narrative to ensure the protagonist survives because the story demands it. But Red Elf World is a system built on rejecting that entirely. It operates on one uncompromising core philosophy, which is consequence before plot armor.
And it takes that very literally.
It does, and I'll be arguing that the Redel world's highly integrated mechanical design, specifically its strict tracking of personal trauma, societal reputation, and cosmic morality, it actually elevates the fantasy role-playing experience into an absolute masterpiece of immersion.
Well, and I will be taking the position that by heavily gamifying morality, relationships, and survival, the system really risks stifling natural roleplay. I mean, when you try to quantify the soul, you risk turning organic, emergent storytelling into what is essentially a rigid, administrative accounting exercise.
I think calling it accounting is a bit reductive, but let me start by outlining the absolute brilliance of Redel World's mechanical integration, because it operates on what I consider the perfect design triangle.
The person-society-world triangle, right?
Right, exactly. The system refuses to let your character's internal life just be background flavor text. At the level of the person, a character's drive, their bands, those are their vowed relationships, and their limits, they all directly fuel progression.
Yeah, the KPG loop.
Right. You earn KPG, the campaign points, by actually playing into these psychological traits. Then you scale up to the society level. You have FRP, which is your faction and reputation impact. And that strictly dictates your social leverage in any given settlement.
It basically measures who trusts you and who wants you dead.
Exactly. And finally, at the level of the world, a karma system tracks the cosmic resonance of your moral choices on a scale from -5 to +5. This isn't just lore. It completely separates Redel World from consequence-free fantasy by ensuring every single choice forces a mechanical weight onto the player.
I'm sorry, but I don't buy that quantifying these elements perfectly unifies narrative and mechanics. I look at that triangle and I see a behavioral trap.
A trap? How so?
Well, I certainly won't deny that the setting itself is breathtakingly detailed. If you look at the hydraulic fortress city of Annalint, where the control of water dictates political power, or, the haunted fog gates of Bakaloth, the world building is top tier.
Oh, absolutely. The setting is incredible.
It is. However, trying to mathematically map the soul of a character is a highly dangerous game design choice. Reducing a profound act of mercy to a +1 karma buff, or boiling down deep psychological trauma to an XP trigger in that KPG loop, it runs a massive risk.
Because it gamifies it?
Exactly. It turns profound moral dilemmas into simple math problems. True narrative consequence should emerge organically through the shared fiction at the table, not from an alignment spreadsheet or a regional difficulty modifier.
Wait, you're looking at the KPG loop and seeing a math problem? I'm not convinced by that line of reasoning because you're completely ignoring how this actually plays out at the table in real time.
Well, let's look at how it plays out then.
Okay, let's look at a typical Red Elf scenario. Imagine your party is in Lastaving, right? A city known for its incredibly strict military pragmatism and its traditional smithing clans.
Right. Very unforgiving place.
Very. Now, let's say your character has a band a vow to protect a marginalized elf, and you see the local constabulary harassing this elf in the street. In a traditional game, you might step in just to be the hero, or ignore it to stay on the main quest. There is no real mechanical weight either way.
Sure, it's just flavor.
But in Red Elf World, if you step in and honor that band, you actively earn KPG for playing your character's truth. Because it's an altruistic risk, you yield +1 karma on the world alignment. But crucially, because you defied the military guard, you immediately lower your FRP with the local faction.
Which means the guards now mechanically hate you.
Yes. The mechanics don't replace the narrative, they enforce it. You can't just say you're an honorable person on your character sheet. The system makes you pay the social cost while rewarding the internal roleplay.
See, that sounds beautifully synergistic until you actually observe the behavioral loop it creates for the player. You are quite literally gamifying the soul.
I think that's a bit dramatic.
No, think about it. If players know their character's limits, their specific traumas, their flaws, their phobias generate KPG experience points, they are structurally incentivized to artificially farm those traumas in every single scene.
Farming trauma.
Yes, if I have a limit of being terrified of the dark, and I know I get points for acting terrified, I'm going to act terrified every time a torch flickers, regardless of whether it fits the natural pacing of the story or the current tension of the scene.
But that's not...
The system dictates how a player must feel, rather than letting the role play breathe. It transforms trauma from a delicate narrative exploration into a button you press to get paid.
I completely disagree with the premise that it's just a button to press because the system explicitly caps this behavior. The rules clearly state you can only earn a maximum of +1 KPG per type per scene.
A cap doesn't change the incentive, though.
But you cannot just span your phobia for infinite experience points. The mechanic is there to remind you that your character's flaws matter, that they are a persistent lens through which you must interact with the physical space.
But does it have to be so rigid?
Yes, because in traditional games, players write these elaborate, tragic backstories, and then they play their characters as perfectly rational, fearless tactical geniuses the moment combat starts. Redelf World says no, your trauma matters mechanically.
Well,
And that mechanical weight extends far beyond just internal psychology. It bleeds into how you interact with the physical world, which brings us to the brutal reality of survival logistics. Redelf World fundamentally rejects the trope of the bottomless backpack.
Yes. The notorious BERT system. This is precisely where I start calling the game a medieval accounting simulator.
You call it an accounting simulator, I call it grounding the stakes in physical reality. Your carrying capacity slots are strictly tied to your attributes, and the genius of the system is the granularity.
Oh, it's granular all right.
Carrying 100 silver coins takes up a full slot. You literally cannot carry a dragon's hoard of silver out of a dungeon without being mechanically crushed by the weight. It forces practical logistical management.
And I question the experiential payoff of that exact mechanic. Let's really drill down into the silver coins example.
Okay, let's hear it.
If a player finds 150 silver coins, they take up 1.5 carrying slots. To avoid the encumbrance penalty, the optimal mechanical play is to go to a money changer in a major hub like Port Lanurion or Bacaloth and exchange those 150 silver coins for 15 gold coins.
Right, because gold is denser.
Simply because gold doesn't take up the same volume. Does exchanging currency denominations, just to walk without a -1 physical penalty, actually enhance the heroic fantasy experience? Or does it just bog down the adventure in tedious administrative paperwork?
It enhances the experience because it forces the players to treat the world as real. Wealth has physical weight. But let's look at how this friction applies to something far more dangerous than carrying silver.
Such as?
Consider what happens when your party decides to cross the sea to the newly discovered islands of Silvana. They don't have the funds or the FRP for a magical singing U-ship, so they charter a normal vessel.
Which is basically a death sentence in this game.
Well, they must roll on the brutal 1D100 travel table. And the sea doesn't just offer a generic bad weather narrative beat. If they roll a 42 to 46, they hit a false coast. The fog paints a literal illusion of land, and they wake up crashing into rocks.
Right.
Or if they roll a 68 to 72, they experience resonance noise in the hull. It's this temporal flicker where they arrive a day late, which consumes extra provision slots they might not have. Survival isn't guaranteed by plot armor.
No, it's earned through a spreadsheet.
It's earned through tracking those torch slots, managing rations, and most importantly, avoiding the sortrappa.
The wound ladder.
Exactly, the wound ladder. Taking physical damage starts applying immediate negative modifiers to your rolls. It creates a death spiral.
A very steep one at that.
When your sword arm has a -2 penalty because you are bleeding on the Ceratroppa, you don't fight to the death over a tavern insult like you would in a heroic fantasy game. You negotiate, you retreat. The mechanics fundamentally alter player psychology from reckless heroism to grounded, desperate survival.
I understand the mechanism of the death spiral, and I agree it changes player psychology, but I argue it changes it for the worse.
How is making combat genuinely terrifying a bad thing?
Because when a game is this granular, players stop engaging with the narrative and start managing their risk portfolios. And even the designers implicitly recognize this burden.
You're talking about the tone dials?
Yes, the rules explicitly offer tone dials, settings to adjust the game between realism and heroism. They're admitting that the baseline survival logistics, the encumbrance, the wound ladder, it might just be too much friction for a fluid narrative table.
That's a mischaracterization.
If the core design philosophy is so perfect, why give the players a dial to turn it down?
Because the tone dials aren't an apology for the system. They are a recognition that different tables want different levels of that friction. But the core assumption of the game is that friction is exactly where the story lives.
I just think it overshadows the story.
Oh boy. If you want to talk about risk portfolios, let's talk about the ultimate risk portfolio, which is the moral fabric of the world itself. The karma system, tracking intent and outcome from -5 to +5, is honestly one of the most brilliant world-building tools I've ever seen in a role-playing game.
Oh boy, I'm bracing myself. Please tell me how the universe mathematically grading my morality is a good thing for role-playing.
It's brilliant because it makes morality a tangible force. Let's look at a complex scenario. The party is back in the magnificent city of Onland, the Crown of Stone.
Okay.
Onland controls those massive water sluices known as the Flodnadet. Suppose the party discovers a plot that threatens to flood the lower Mistquays, the Shoykrensen, where the marginalized fishermen and commoners live.
Right, the slums, basically.
Right. The party fights their way into the sluice controls and manages to manipulate the water network to save the docks. But in doing so, they wash out the underground tunnels used by the Nightcloak Guild, which is a highly secretive and dangerous faction of thieves.
A classic zero-sum choice. You save one group, you doom another.
Exactly. And the mechanics track this beautifully across the societal and world levels. Because they save the commoners, they gain FRP reputation with the people of Shoykrensen.
Makes sense.
Because they ruin the thieves' hideout, they immediately lose FRP with the Nightcloak Guild. But crucially, because they took a massive personal risk to perform an act of altruism for the defenseless, they gain a point of karma. The world mathematically and mechanically reacts to both their intent and the outcome.
So they get a mechanical cookie for being good.
They get recognized by the world. Characters with high karma might find that the ancient spirits of the riverless forest react differently to them, or that invoking sacred magic in desperate moments costs less. The world remembers what you do.
Look, I hear the poetry in what you're saying, but the actual execution at the table is what I call a cosmic vending machine.
A cosmic vending machine?
Yes, it creates a purely transactional relationship with empathy. If players know that saving a villager yields a +1 karma, and they also know that having a positive karma score mechanically grants a -2 to SV difficulty modifiers in sacred places, aren't they acting for the mechanical buff rather than genuine character altruism?
I think you're being too cynical about player motivations.
You say the world remembers, but what the player remembers is that they need exactly a +2 karma score to safely wield a specific holy artifact they found. It risks turning empathy into an optimization strategy.
But
Furthermore, when the game master announces that action will cost you -1 karma, it completely strips away the ambiguity of moral choice. The universe is telling you mathematically that your philosophical stance was wrong.
But that's exactly the point of real world. You are holding it to the standard of our modern relativistic world. In this fantasy setting, the universe does have a stance.
A mathematical one?
The light line, the flow of magic, the ancient beings, these are real, tangible forces. Morality isn't just a subjective philosophical debate you have over ale in a tavern. It is a physical law of the setting, just like gravity.
Okay, but
If you slaughter innocents, the cosmic echo, the karma, will make the shadows of the Talk Desert actively hostile to you. The mechanics aren't a vending machine. They are a mirror. They merely surface the underlying, undeniable reality of the setting.
I appreciate the mirror metaphor, I really do. But let's step back and look at the sheer mental load you are asking a table to carry to maintain that mirror.
It's not that bad once you learn the systems.
You are asking players to synthesize an enormous amount of data simultaneously. They have to track their daily KPG triggers through the limit loop. They have to monitor the mechanical weight of the board economy so they don't get crushed by their own rations.
Which grounds them in the reality of travel.
They have to calculate regional SV modifiers, because sneaking past guards in the strict city of Bacalaf has a fundamentally higher difficulty value than doing it elsewhere. They have to manage the dual tracking of karma and FRP, constantly separating how mortals judge them from how the universe judges them.
Right.
And on top of all that, they have to survive the deadly consequence-first combat driven by the Sautrapa wound ladder. It's exhausting.
And when you synthesize all of those elements, you achieve a level of immersion that a rules-light game simply cannot offer.
Well, I won't deny that those elements create a highly cohesive, incredibly dangerous world where choices absolutely matter. The integration between the setting and the rules is, frankly, airtight.
Thank you.
But I must warn that this level of simulation requires a highly meticulous group of players to avoid complete system overload. The mechanics demand absolute, unyielding buy-in from the entire table.
Which is true of any good crunch-heavy game.
Sure, but if even one player at the table just wants to swing a sword, kick in a door, and save the day without checking their encumbrance slots, the weight of the system will crush the pacing of the game. It is a brilliant design, but it requires a very specific, highly analytical palate.
I hear the warning there, but Redelf World isn't trying to cater to the player who just wants to kick in a door without consequences. It is unapologetically demanding.
That we can agree on.
It forces the mechanical integration of the person, the society, and the world to ensure that its philosophy is never just an empty promise. When you survive a journey across the sea, or navigate the political nightmare of Anatiland, you know you earned it. The game refuses to lie to you.
And while I will always maintain that the heavy gamification of survival logistics and the mathematical grading of morality risks overshadowing the narrative for a lot of tables, there is no denying the sheer achievement in the world building itself.
The setting is just unparalleled.
It is. From the deep sea singing resonances of the underwater realm of Jufiar Tats to the magical, delicately balanced ecosystem of the riverless forest, the lore is staggering. Redelf's World's absolute rejection of consequence-free fantasy is a bold design choice, even if the math gets heavy. It forces us to ask what we really want out of our mechanics.
Right. Ultimately, looking at RPG design from both these mechanical and narrative perspectives reveals just how ambitious Redelf World really is. By making the rules the uncompromising bad guy, the game master is actually freed up to just be the neutral arbiter of a living, breathing world.
Which is a fascinating way to run a table.
There is so much more to explore in this rich lore, from the fog gates to the hydraulic fortresses. We leave it to you to decide for yourselves where the perfect balance lies at your own table. In a world where gravity is absolute, do you want the mechanics to ruthlessly enforce the fall, or do you want the narrative to weave a safety net?
A question every group has to answer for themselves before they roll the dice.
Thank you for joining us. Until next time.